Hello and welcome to The Drum. I'm Steve Kinane. Coming up, cattlemen finally get compensation, but not from the MLA. New York approves gay marriage. Could Australia follow? And what chance the tobacco industry could win its legal case against the federal government? Our panel tonight, former Liberal advisor and social media consultant Tommy Tudhope, author and blogger Anthony Lowenstein, and in Canberra, ABC social media reporter Latika Burke. Well, it seems that Australians are losing interest in taking action on carbon pollution. The Lowy Institute's annual survey asked around 1,000 people for their opinions on a range of topics, including climate change. The poll found just 41% believe urgent action is needed, down 5 points from last year, down 27 points from 5 years ago.
We've seen the failure of the Copenhagen climate change talks. We've seen significant questioning of the science behind climate change. And I think we've seen the domestic political divide in terms of action on climate change become much sharper and much more divisive. And so I think all of that has led to a steady slide in public support for taking action on this issue.
The poll was taken in March this year. Now, Latika, this is a huge shift in opinion. 41% of Australians now think addressing climate change is a serious and pressing issue. 27 points down from 5 years ago. It's a huge shift.
Yeah, and it correlates with every other poll that's come out in probably the last 12 to 18 months that really does show that the government's actions or fight to address climate change are going to be made that bit harder, because between 2007, when you could say that support for climate change and, importantly, paying for climate change at the personal level was at its peak. Now, of course, we know what happened to Kevin Rudd. He squandered that opportunity. He failed to go to a double dissolution election, which might have seen his emissions trading scheme through. So now that Labor is trying round two on an emissions trading scheme, its fight is all that much harder, and much of it because of its own doing.
Tommy, what do you put that 27-point swing down to in the 5 year period?
Yeah, I think Latika made a fair point there. I think, 2006, 2007, we had Kyoto, we had Inconvenient Truth, we had Al Gore trumping his myths as well. But since then, Kevin Rudd's really squandered the first opportunity with his ETS or CPRS, but Labor's message is really the core problem here. They're still barking on about, saving the environment, save the planet. They need to prosecute an economic message for having a carbon tax, and it's that lack of clear narrative that's really undermined that message, and I'm not surprised at all that this had a significant drop. I think also you probably have to factor in there the very effective campaign that Tony Abbott has undertaken in the last 12 months. I think that would partly attribute to these low sort of figures.
Andy, your thoughts on this?
I think one of the things that comes out is that the Labor Party has been so incompetent at selling the message. I mean, yes, I think I agree with Tommy that that Abbott's Liberal Party has run a campaign which essentially says climate change might be real, yes, but the way we're going to prosecute is going to be very, very different. The problem, I think, also is that many people who advocate and support doing something on climate change, as I do, have actually not been tolerant enough about dissent, about that discussion. So a debate requires a debate. It doesn't require simply saying to someone, my view is right and yours is wrong. I'm not saying there are two equal sides. I think climate change is real and the science shows that unequivocally. But ultimately there needs to be a debate by people actually who can prosecute an argument. Gillard cannot sell anything, including her own house. I mean, clearly she's in a position where anything she says... A few days ago on AM, she was talking about the year since Rudd was assassinated. All she said was, I'm prosecuting a reform agenda 15 times. That's not it says nothing to anyone about anything. So
could this all change once they get the details out?
They hope so. I mean, maybe. I mean, certainly at least they can argue how much people are going to have to pay for electricity and everything. And most people are struggling out there to pay for their lives. That's what people care about ultimately. And the people who worry about, like me, living in the city, actually see it very differently. I think there's been a lot less dissent and toleration of different views about this than there should be from my side, so to speak.
So you think calling people deniers and sceptics has hampered the pro-carbon tax?
I think there are a lot of people who have prosecuted the argument to support climate change who have not been open enough to debate. I mean, whether you use the word denier, sceptic, I think comparing people to Holocaust deniers, as some people have, is just absurd and also offensive, frankly.
Steve, I would also add there that I think a lot of this is to do with carbon tax fatigue or carbon price fatigue, climate change fatigue, whatever you want to call it, because we've been discussing this issue for now about 4 to 5 years, and quite intensely this issue has dominated politics, whether it be the policy aspect or the political aspect in claiming leaders like Malcolm Turnbull and Kevin Rudd. This has been really at the forefront of the debate, and it would come as no surprise to people that, you know, maybe 3 years ago, tabloid and commercial news outlets were saying no more climate change stories. We don't think the audience is listening. And I wonder now if they're still listening.
Well, another part of that Lowy Institute report was that 3/4 of Australia